When people talk about the most unforgettable romantic comedies ever made, one film almost always rises above the rest. It's charming, it's glamorous, and it tells a love story that feels straight out of a modern fairy tale. But what if I told you that behind all that sparkle lies a collection of mistakes, surprises, and behind-the-scenes moments that most viewers never noticed? From wardrobe slip-ups to unexpected casting twists, from scenes that almost didn't exist to details that completely changed the film's direction, this story is far more fascinating than it appears on the surface. And once you start noticing these hidden details, you'll never watch it the same way again. Let's dive in. At first glance, the story feels simple. A wealthy businessman crosses paths with a woman living a completely different life, and what starts as a practical arrangement slowly turns into something much deeper. But beneath that simplicity is a layered dynamic that made audiences fall in love with the film. Vivian isn't just a character. She represents resilience, transformation, and vulnerability. And Edward? He's not just the polished businessman he appears to be. Beneath his composed exterior is someone disconnected, searching for meaning in a world driven by power and money. When their worlds collide, it doesn't just create romance, it creates tension, curiosity, and growth. What makes their connection so compelling isn't just attraction. It's contrast. They come from opposite realities, yet somehow find common ground in the most unexpected ways. And as they spend more time together, their relationship evolves from transactional to emotional, from distant to deeply personal. But here's the twist most people don't realize. This heartwarming fairy tale wasn't always meant to be one. Before it became the beloved romantic comedy we know today, the story started off in a completely different place. The original script painted a much darker picture. Instead of a whimsical love story, it was a gritty drama that explored harsh realities, addiction, emotional struggles, and the darker side of relationships. Even the title reflected that tone. It wasn't charming or romantic. It was blunt, transactional, almost cold. And if things had stayed that way, the film would have been something entirely different, likely far less magical and definitely less iconic. But then something changed. A shift in vision transformed the story into something softer, more hopeful, and ultimately more appealing to a wider audience. The darker edges were smoothed out, and the narrative leaned into a fairy tale-like tone. Instead of focusing on hardship, it focused on transformation. Instead of tragedy, it embraced possibility. And that single decision changed everything. It's hard to imagine the film being called anything else today, but the original title didn't exactly inspire romance. In fact, it sounded more like a financial transaction than a love story. The number itself represented the arrangement between the two main characters, practical, direct, and completely devoid of emotional depth. But once the tone of the film shifted, the title had to follow. The new name captured something entirely different. It wasn't about money anymore. It was about perception, beauty, and transformation. It reflected how the world saw Vivian and how she eventually saw herself. That change might seem small, but it played a huge role in shaping how audiences connected with the story. Sometimes one decision can redefine everything. Now, here's where things get interesting. Even though the film feels polished and seamless, it's actually filled with small errors, tiny details that slipped through production and made it into the final cut. And once you notice them, they're impossible to ignore. Take one scene, for example. Vivian interacts with Edward in a quiet, intimate moment. She adjusts something, walks away, and then suddenly in the very next shot, everything has changed. It's subtle, easy to miss, but when you spot it, you can't help but wonder, how did that get through editing? Moments like these remind us that even the most carefully crafted films aren't perfect. And honestly, that's part of their charm. But if you think that was strange, this next one takes things to another level. There's a breakfast scene that at first glance seems completely normal. Nothing unusual, just two characters sharing a quiet moment. But look closer. What starts as one type of food suddenly becomes something entirely different between cuts. No explanation, no transition, just a complete transformation. Fans have debated it, tried to justify it, even created theories around it, but the truth is much simpler. It's a classic continuity error. And yet, it became one of the most talked about mistakes in film history. Funny how something so small can leave such a big impression. Filmmaking isn't always as smooth as it looks. Sometimes, unexpected things happen on set, things that no one plans for. There were moments when actors became nervous during important scenes to the point where physical reactions started showing on camera. Other times, external factors completely disrupted filming, noises, distractions, even unpredictable surroundings. And then there were scenes that had to be shot over and over again, not because they weren't good enough, but because something kept going wrong. Clothes got dirty, props didn't behave, even the environment refused to cooperate. It's a reminder that behind every perfect scene is a series of imperfect attempts. Now imagine this. What if the actors you associate with this film were never in it? Because that almost happened. Before the final casting was locked in, numerous big names were considered. Some were interested, some turned it down. Others simply didn't fit the vision. Even the lead roles weren't guaranteed. In fact, there was a moment when everything seemed uncertain, when it wasn't clear who would bring these characters to life. And then something unexpected happened. A simple, heartfelt moment between two people changed the course of the film. It wasn't a contract. It wasn't a negotiation. It was just a genuine request, one that came from a place of sincerity. And somehow that was enough. That decision led to one of the most iconic on-screen pairings in cinematic history. It's hard to imagine the film working the same way with anyone else. Some of the most memorable moments in film history weren't planned. They weren't written in the script. They just happened. This film has one of those moments. A simple gesture. Quick, unexpected, completely natural. And yet, it became one of the most recognizable scenes in the entire movie. That's the magic of improvisation. When actors fully connect with their characters, they bring something extra, something that can't be scripted. And sometimes those spontaneous moments become the ones audiences remember the most. Not everything you see on screen is exactly as it appears. Sometimes creative decisions are made behind the scenes to enhance the final product, even if it means altering reality a little. There were instances where appearances were adjusted, details were modified, and visual elements were enhanced to better fit the film's tone. Even promotional materials weren't entirely untouched. Subtle changes were made to create a more polished, appealing image, one that aligned perfectly with the story's romantic atmosphere. It's a reminder that filmmaking is as much about illusion as it is about storytelling. Every film is shaped by decisions. Some are big, some seem small at the time, but end up having a massive impact. There were choices about wardrobe that almost went in a completely different direction, decisions about locations that had to change unexpectedly, moments where creativity had to step in and solve problems in real time. And in each case, those decisions didn't just fix issues, they improved the film. They made it more memorable, more unique, more timeless. Even the ending wasn't guaranteed. There was a version of the story that ended on a much darker note, one that would have completely changed how audiences felt walking away from the film. But ultimately, a different path was chosen, a more hopeful one that embraced the fairy tale tone the film had evolved into. And that choice made all the difference. Because sometimes audiences don't just want realism. They want hope. They want transformation. They want to believe that things can turn out better than expected. When the film was finally released, no one could have predicted just how successful it would become. It wasn't just popular, it became a cultural phenomenon. Audiences connected with it in a way that few films ever achieve. It wasn't just about romance. It was about growth, connection, and the idea that people from completely different worlds can find something meaningful together. And even decades later, that message still resonates. New generations continue to discover it, to fall in love with it, to find something relatable within its story. Because, at its core, it's not just a movie. It's a feeling. Now that you know the hidden details, the mistakes, and the behind-the-scenes secrets, think back. Did you notice any of them while watching? Or did they slip right past you? Because that's the beauty of films like this. No matter how many times you watch them, there's always something new to discover. And sometimes it's those tiny imperfections that make them even more unforgettable.